I've wanted to learn more about structural dissociation for a while, and I've known that there's this book called The Haunted Self that is kind of like the Bible for structural dissociation, but it's like $50 to get it used. But I got an ebook copy of it. I'm usually strictly a physical book girly, but because of the price of this book, I gave in and I'm going the ebook route. Read it off of my laptop, so forgive the kind of weird lighting in my glasses and so on. So I'm going to do many more videos on this, I'm sure, because I'm like already so fascinated and I'm not even through the first chapter, but here are parts that I wanted to read. This first part kind of speaks to why we end up with one or more ANPs that are kind of for normal, like daily functioning, and why we end up with EPs, which are more like trauma responses. The first category of action systems that make up personality involves action systems that support individuals in efforts to adapt to daily life. The second category pertains to the action systems for defense from major threat and recuperation. Whereas evolution has prepared us for both tasks of daily living and for survival under threat, we are not able to engage with ease in both simultaneously. Thus, when both are necessary, particularly for long periods of time, some individuals develop rather rigid division of their personality to deal with these very discrepant goals and related activities. This part was several pages later on something quite different, but Myers was not implying that emotion is only experienced by emotional parts. Rather, he was emphasizing the overwhelming and vehement nature of EP's traumatic emotions in comparison to ANP. Vehement emotion differs from intense emotion in that it is not adaptive, is overwhelming to the individual, and expression is not helpful. That really surprised me. In fact, the more it is expressed, the more dysfunctional and overwhelmed the survivor becomes. For example, this is commonly seen in borderline patients who express rage. The more they express, the more out of control they become. Again, another section of the book, but it says, a part may contain mental actions such as sadness, guilt, despair, or shame, and other parts may find those emotions intolerable. However, such emotions are very likely connected to action systems that help regulate our attachments and social positions. Same quote, but it goes on. Individuals may be ashamed of certain actions when they fear that others will reject or despise them for engaging in those actions, and they may feel guilty if their actions have hurt others. This is, again, several pages later. Traditionally, phobias have been relegated to the category of anxiety disorders and have been understood to be directed to external cues, such as spiders, heights, germs, and social phobia, and to have psychodynamic meaning. However, phobias can also pertain to inner phenomena, to mental actions, such as particular thoughts, feelings, fantasies, sensations, and memories. Therapists who work with chronically traumatized individuals will readily recognize that such patients are often extraordinarily fearful of mental actions as well as external stimuli that remind them of the traumatic experience. According to Genet, the core phobia in trauma-related structural dissociation consists of an avoidance of the synthesis and full realization of the traumatic experience and its effects on one's life, the phobia of traumatic memory. Behavioral and mental avoidance strategies which maintain structural dissociation are needed to prevent what are perceived as unbearable realizations about one's self, history, and meaning. Subsequently, additional phobias ensue from the fundamental phobia of traumatic memory. A little bit further down. When survivors associate an increasing number of stimuli with the traumatic experience and memory through stimulus generalization, they may start to fear and avoid more and more of inner and outer life. For example, when survivors in their ANP have intrusive traumatic memories and associate this aversive intrusion with EP, they develop a phobia of this dissociative part. So you can become phobic of your own EPs. Survivor as EP or in EP can become phobic of ANP when the ANP part is perceived as ignoring or harming, such as neglecting or abusing the EP in some way. So you can have your ANP be phobic of your EPs and your EPs phobic of your ANPs. In fact, survivors can become anxious and avoidant of any mental action, such as having particular feelings, sensations, and thoughts that are consciously or unconsciously associated with the original traumatic experience or experiences. Thus, most survivors have some degree of phobia of trauma-derived mental actions. A bit further, phobias of attachment and attachment loss easily develop because chronically traumatized individuals have been hurt by other human beings, especially caretakers. Thus, attachment is experienced as dangerous, but also, of course, as necessary. Phobia of attachment is often paradoxically accompanied by the equally intense phobia of attachment loss. It manifests in desperate feelings and behaviors that motivate the individual to connect to another person at all costs. Typically, different parts of the personality experience these opposite phobias. They evoke each other in a vicious cycle, with a perceived change in closeness or distance in a relationship resulting in the well-known borderline pattern of "I hate you, don't leave me," more recently described as disorganized attachment or disoriented attachment. Another quote. Another manifestation of generalization is the phobia of normal life. Since normal life involves at least a basic level of healthy risk-taking and change, many experiences of normal life also become vigorously avoided. Finally, more mature levels of attachment, such as intimacy, are avoided due to the plethora of phobias related to attachment and trauma-derived mental actions that have become conditioned stimuli, because most chronic traumatization is of an interpersonal nature. The ebook says I am 5% done with this book currently, so follow along if you want to see me read more passages of this book moving forward. Also, feel free to drop comments if there are any specific questions about structural dissociation that you have, that I can keep an eye out for the answers to those questions as I read this book, and we'll try to quote those specific answers.